Okay, here we are. It's January 2023, and we have returned for another Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group session. And this month we have Taylor Sharpe. He's going to be presenting his audit trail system, and we're looking forward to seeing that. So, Taylor, take it away.
Okay, greetings everyone. Hopefully you're seeing my screen here. Everybody see that, hopefully? Just confirmation, someone?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, good. Okay, now we can get going here. Greetings everybody. My name's Taylor Sharpe. I'm a FileMaker developer down in Texas. Been doing this full-time since about 2013, and I've actually been using FileMaker from all the way back to my college days when I was using it to keep lab data way back in the day at the University of Texas, but this was way back in the 80s. So been using it forever. I never had any idea back then that I'd actually it would become a business career of mine at some point, but it eventually did over the years. I actually spent a couple of decades being an environmental engineer, but I finally found out I enjoyed doing database work in combination with finding solutions for business processes, and FileMaker is something that I enjoyed more, and I finally jumped out and started doing that full time, and I've enjoyed doing that and working with this tool and see it grow and change over the years and add an awful lot of capabilities. But one of the things that has always been an interesting thing is there's always been this tension out there whether or not FileMaker is considered enterprise software or not, or is it enterprise ready or not, or whatever. And so there are lots of arguments can be made about that. Usually the arguments are made by someone running some big Oracle or whatever database that once they're trying to find a way to get rid of FileMaker, and so they like to diss it by saying, well, that's not enterprise software. But anyway, I've fought lots of those battles before, but one of the things that often comes up are the issues about keeping track of audits and deletes and histories of what's changed and who changed it and those types of things. And of course, the context that happens a lot of this time is over what went wrong where, and so that we can fix things. And I know we can all appreciate when something's changed and we don't know who changed it or why they changed it. And even if it's not just a matter of trying to catch someone at fraud, if it's just trying to educate them, knowing what changed when is kind of an important thing. So FileMaker has always been a little bit quiet about this, but they've actually had these tools around for a long time that let us do a certain amount of audit and deletes history. And this literally started many years ago when I was just doing some real basic things where, of course, we all create a field that's created by date and then modified by date, and then we realize it only keeps the last modification. What about the previous modifications? And then you can make it an array field where you keep the last dates modified, but then you don't know who it was by or whatever. So there's all those little things that we have that are going out there to keep track of these things. And I've had, when I used to work for the U.S. government, one of the accusations that FileMaker is not capable of keeping track of when things are changing all. And I set out to prove them wrong and say, yes, it is. So anyway, this is a little bit of a metamorphosis of how things kind of grew when I was trying to defend FileMaker against the Oracle big wigs in the U.S. government that were trying to squeeze FileMaker out and get everything done in Oracle. And I had the joy of having FileMaker do a number of things that they weren't able to do in Oracle, or they literally took years to do, and frustrate a bunch of the DBAs in the government. That was kind of fun to do. But anyway. Okay, so let's look at a couple of definitions here. So long as we're talking about audits and database logs and things like that, here are a couple of definitions I just pulled off the web. First one's audit logs. I'll just read it to you. Is audit log, also called an audit trail, essentially a record of events and changes. IT devices across your network create logs based on events. Audit logs are records of these event logs, typically regarding a sequence of activities or a specific activity. Audit logs don't always operate in the same way. In fact, they vary significantly between devices, applications, and operating systems, but typically they capture events by recording who performed an activity, what activity is performed, and how the system responded. So obviously audit logs apply a lot broader thing than just databases, but and we'll just be looking at it from the database side of things, but this obviously applies to routers and all kinds of devices out there that keep logs of various activities, server activities that are going on. Then a database log, which is more what we're looking at, tracks changes when data and records and fields are created, modified, or deleted. A database log may track additional information such as access or events run on the database engine, such as batch jobs, schedule scripts, or backups. And of course, if you're familiar with the FileMaker admin console, we do have some logging of the actual server activities that some of you are hopefully familiar with, but we're not going to go over here. So the why, of course, I gave you a little bit of the why from Taylor's perspective, which was, fighting off the enterprise argument against FileMaker and fighting off the Oracle people. But the real thing that if you're a FileMaker developer that you end up talking, say I'm a small FileMaker developer guy, I'm talking to a small business that's saying, why would I want to pay you to do an audit system? Well, the main sales thing that you give to a decision maker is to prevent or investigate fraud. So this is where, you think some employee has, cashed a receipt and then taken the money in cash and then deleted the receipt record and pocketed it or something like that. So, something nefarious is going on. And true, that usually is the main selling point for, why we do audit things to a decision maker. However, the reality is audit logs more often end up finding where employees or users of the software solution are improperly trained or doing things the wrong way. And so really more of the logs are about to find out who did what wrong so that you can re-educate them into doing it the right way. So it's more about employee training or user training than it is necessarily about preventing fraud, even though the sales pitch often is about, here's how you prevent fraud. So, okay, so relational database management system auditings. There's all types of various levels of auditing out there. And if you're familiar with some of the big database systems, Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle, you can turn on this total auditing system that really audits every action that is done on the database. And it's so voluminous, it's almost not very useful. But something that also is useful is not only tracking when things are changed, but guess what? Maybe there's a term out there that's common in the audit in the world called rolling back. So that means you have a change that you didn't want. And if you want to get it back in the state that it was before, that's called rolling back the data to an earlier state for a given record or field or entire database. So those are some things that are out there. I'm going to talk about just the FileMaker tools that we have that are given for free. In other words, they don't cost anything other than your time in development. But there are some other Claris Marketplace solutions out there that may go beyond what I'm going to show you here that's in the free end of things. So there is in the Claris Marketplace, there's the Audit add-on, there's the FM Audit Pro 2, and the Elemental logs are some, they may offer some additional features, but they also cost. So basically, usually what I tell people is, here's the free one, check out the free one. If you want to go beyond the free one, check out, some of these other options that are out there in the marketplace. So moving forward here, couple of caveats out there about any audit system. All audit systems inherently have some performance impact. So there's no way of saying an audit log has none. Generally, a good audit system has a very minimal a reduction in performance. And that is obviously our goal, because one of the big things I have with most all of my clients is they want FileMaker to perform faster. It's never fast enough. So got to be careful when you're doing an audit log. If it kills performance so much that it's not usable, then you might as well not have an audit system if your system becomes unusable. Audit logs, obviously, they take up storage, they take up space. That space has to be saved somewhere. So just realize that when you start doing auditing, you're going to have to, store that stuff. I typically don't, the days of storage costing a lot are pretty much in the past, but it does mean, even though storage doesn't cost much now, it does mean planning to make sure that you do have the room for those storage things. I did mention before about some of the SQL database engines having automatic where you can turn on logging for everything. FileMaker does not have that option. It would be kind of nice if they did, but we have what we have, and I think we can provide a solution that does most of what I think people or businesses need in the business world to solve what are their needs. But I will say, if you really need a total audit system, there are some obviously more expensive ones in the say the Oracle realm or something you can get at too. When you're working within the FileMaker solutions that I'm going to show you, some of the challenges you have with audit systems are that someone with full access privileges can bypass many of these tools. So if you're going to have an audit system, you don't want non-developers to have full access privileges, and basically it's a best business practice. The only people that should have full access are your developers and maybe someone with a backup password for the company in case they need to bring a new developer in or something. But you should not have any of your users, even if they're the bigwig boss or whatever, with full access, because among other things, it bypasses audit things. And one of the things is, how good is an audit system if you have people that can regularly bypass it? Well, it doesn't mean a whole lot then. So there are also some circumstances where you might not want to log things. For example, I run some batch updates each night that update, record values, like, the sales amount for the year for a given customer. Do I want to have that update stored every night in that customer's record or whatever? Well, probably not, because that's just a, batch update temporary value field that I'm updating each day. So there's certain things that you don't want to log. So be careful when people say, I want to log everything. It's like, no, you don't really want to log everything, but you want to be able to log most things. So those are some issues to think about when you're wanting to audit things. And I will say, ideally, audit logging, and in most circumstances, is stored in a separate file instead of inside of the database. And what I'm going to show you right now is only going to be storing data within FileMaker. Now, granted, you can use FileMaker has some more tools recently to do a better job of writing log files to a text file. And so, there may be some looking at that beyond what I've done here in the functions that I'm going to give you here. But there's obviously the further you want to delve into things, there are a lot of capabilities, but they also get a little more complex. So what I'm gonna present here is basically a quick and dirty what solves most businesses' needs for audit logging. And it will be done within FileMaker and through a custom function. Okay, then it's hard to deal with keeping track of auditing when people are changing records or editing records without also dealing with the other elephant in the room, deletes. So does it matter if you're keeping track of if people change records or not, if they can also delete? And then if that delete deletes the whole history, well, that doesn't make much sense. And of course, our databases generally come with the user defaults that people are allowed to delete records. And that is a real problem in the if you're going to actually keep track of audit things. You can't have people deleting unless they're going through the audit system somehow. So what the solution I have on FileMaker is that the only privilege that is allowed to delete is the full access privilege. Everybody else that wants to delete has to use a script, and you can assign that to a button or whatever that deletes records, and only that delete script will delete records. But in addition to deleting the record, the delete script will then store what is being deleted. I create a deletes table, and it's just a JSON. It's just got a new record for each delete, and it has the JSON of what record was deleted and what were all the values at the time it was deleted, who deleted it, and that type of information. So that's how I deal with deletes in FileMaker, but you do have to make sure that nobody that has full access out there is deleting things. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't end up in the delete history. Another issue too is that, and this is with all databases, you got container fields, which are called blob files, and a lot of other things are 8-bit versions of things, and most text fields are 7-bit. So if you do have container fields, you either have to convert them, base 64 encode them, or you have to create a separate deletes table, which is what I usually do to store container values. So just be aware that that's also an issue in doing deletes. So that kind of gets us to a basic history of things and what our goals are. So before I talk about how we're going to accomplish this, I'm going to see if there are any questions up to this point on what our goals are with audits and logging as well as deletes. Any questions out there? Got a quiet group.
I think we're okay. We're enjoying your talk, Taylor.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on at this point here.
That was a nice overview. That's very well thought out. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, okay. And of course, what I've done and how I've talked about it is assuming you guys as a target audience are FileMaker developers. This would not be useful for a new user to FileMaker or something. So keep in mind that the target audience is, I've made a lot of assumptions. I will show you, now that we talked about deletes, I'm going to show you an example of my delete button in script. So I've got a delete script here. I create a button, and then in that button, I have a script parameter, and then I can use this delete button throughout my solution here. But the delete button basically gets me the field value. It breaks it up into the table occurrence and the primary key field, and get you the value of that field. And then it creates a JSON here that you submit as a script parameter into the delete script. And the delete script goes over to the deletes table and writes that this particular record value into that deletes table. And it uses the key field to find the record, and then it takes all the stored values, not the calculated ones, just the stored values, so no calculation or summary fields, and saves them into the deletes table. And then that's very useful for going back and seeing who deleted what and when. But to make it work, though, you need a script or a button. And so here's a button, and here's the script parameter in that button that does this. And so if you click on it, we see here's our script. That's the same script that we were looking at, just with bigger text. And then it's all attached to this button, and it runs from a script called delete record. And that delete record is in this solution that I'm going to show you. And this is all a template that you guys get to download if you want from my webpage. It's a free template. There's no licensing cost to it or anything, that lets you download it and edit and do whatever you want with it. But this is the delete, and then you can of course go up to the workspace and you can take a look at the delete script. So here's the delete record script. Notice over here, you see the little guy right here? That means it runs at full access. So this is important, because when that script runs, if your users don't have full access, which they shouldn't, they won't be able to delete anything. But this script, you have to grant full access privilege to, that lets you delete records. The script is then able to do, since it's running in full access, it can delete a record and then save the deleted information. But you don't give full access to the users. You only give the full access privilege set to this delete script here. So this is where when you're in the script, that you can grant the full access privilege to the particular script. So, okay. Getting back to where we were at, let me close this here. I will also tell you that every developer has their little way of doing things that is a little different, and every one of us thinks our way is the best way. Look over here on the right. Here's what FileMaker considers the default field. So if you create a table, it by default is going to create these fields. These are not the default fields that I want, because I want some additional information. And so I have a different set of default fields that I keep track of, that I start them all off with this SYS as a way of getting them to group together. I want to keep who created it, who was created by the host. And then this is very useful if you end up with a system that is going to be used across time zones. I am always putting the UTC time in there, and that really does matter if you have a system that gets used across multiple time zones. Using UTC time is very important to keep things in order when they happen. So I keep that. And then also I create a text field called history that will have a JSON of the history of all changes, and I'll show you that here shortly, but that's the field that I'm keeping everything in. To make this work, you have some required functions. The get modified fields function has to be called, and that's what triggers a script or a calculation happening. So FileMaker by default lets you, when you're managing databases, you can have this get modified by, and you have the option modification, account name, or let's see, get modified. Here's the timestamp, modification timestamp. The nice thing about this is FileMaker says anytime any stored field is being changed in there, it automatically updates this. Well, we know that when something's been modified, that, hey, changes have been made. And so this function happening, this sysmodified, where this timestamp is being put in this field, lets us trigger the history that we are going to do here to keep track of what changes on. So that's very important, this get modified fields function. And then, of course, we need the timestamp, which this function goes within that timestamp field. And then we also need the creation timestamp, which is also just like the modification one, but it happens only when the record is created. So, okay, so, but now we know what we need to do. But how are we going to do that? And so we're going to have this audit field that we're going to put this information in. I mean, you could actually have a whole database where you break everything up into different fields and all, but we have a great way to store chunks of information with JSON. And if you're not familiar with JSON, JavaScript object notation, FileMaker does a great support of it, but it's a name value pair tool that lets you keep track of names and values. And in the case of here, we're keeping track of a record, and the name is going to be all the field names, and the values are going to be what is the value in that field. And so we're going to use this audit field to store the JSON of what changes were made, and that's going to give you the field name and what the change is. I will make some little comment here that as a FileMaker developer, you have to be aware that the replace function and the import function do not trigger the script get modified timestamp functions. So you either need to script those, have a replacement script for people to loop through for you, or you need to disable that. And then, of course, imports are probably no big surprise to you that overrides things. But just be aware that those things are not automatically triggered by the audit field if you're using the get system modified function. So that is one thing to be aware of in designing your solution. So originally, I just had a long field calculation, and I calculated. I would use that calculation and put it in every different table. But eventually, I realized once you use a particular calculation over and over long enough, it's easier to make a custom function. I don't know why for years and years, I really did not like using custom functions, because you couldn't always assume that they were in a system. You have to make sure a solution has the custom function in it. But I've certain things like this kind of wooed me over that custom functions really are important, because it certainly simplifies what you're going to put in here in your field calculation for that history audit field. So what I've done is I've created a custom function for keeping track of the histories. And that custom function here is just called TMS history. And all you have to do is in that function for this system history field is provide the primary key field of that particular table. You don't need to provide the schema global field anymore. That used to be something I did before we had the base tables function in FileMaker 19.4. And so things got a whole lot faster, and so we don't need this anymore. But if you're working on old systems, you may need to do that. But basically, it's where I've stored the schema in a field, in a global field, to access it, because performance was real slow otherwise. And remember, at the very beginning when we were talking, we said that, hey, performance is a big issue. If your audit history thing slows things up so much that it's not usable, then it's pointless to even have it. So anyway, keeping that in mind, we have to have the modification timestamp field. What is the field that is triggering the timestamp? Then we need to know what the history field is that we're going to store it in. I also have some omit fields. So if you want to omit certain fields that you don't want to be saved in the history, you can define those fields in here that you don't want to be saved. And there may be various reasons why you want to do that. And then I keep a track of a max number of saves. So one of the questions is, if I have an update that runs every hour or every minute or whatever, your history could grow, ridiculously long for every field that it's updating. I usually set a max saves of either 100 or 500, and basically say, if anything goes over that, it saves the original creation record, but it deletes all other history other than the last number of saves you want. If you set the max saves at 0, it saves everything. And you may want to have it save everything, but I'm just saying there's sometimes when you're doing a lot of updates of the same record over and over, you end up with a bunch of saves and a bunch of garbage in your audit. And if it gets too unwieldy, it might not be all that useful for you. So anyway, that is the custom function that I'm going to show you how it works here. So here is the custom function, and it doesn't really fit in there. So I'm going to come over here to custom functions. And this is where the custom functions are that I use here. These are the history ones. And here's the primary one that you're going to use. And all you have to do is open this template, and you can copy these custom functions, do a copy, and then you copy, and then you go over to your own solution and paste it in there, and they're good to go at that point. But here is the function right here, and this is probably too small to read, so you'll probably just need to download it if you want to take a look at it. But it's got instructions and some of the history in here. But basically, it goes through and loops through, and probably the biggest thing that it keeps track of are what are these what fields have been changed, and it records just those changes. Now it just shows you what it was changed to. It doesn't show what it was changed from. So in the audits, if you want to know what the previous value was, you have to go back to the previous JSON records to see what the previous values were. But it saves in this system everything that is being changed, as well as some information about, and this could all be customized by you, but right now I'm saving things: who changed it, what's their username, what device, what FileMaker system version they're using, what operating system version they're using, timestamp, their privilege set. One thing that is useful is I also, if they are running a script when this change is made, I also store the script name, because that can be useful to know, did that user change it manually, or were they running a script when it changed something? So that is also very useful in the history field. And then it goes through, and as you can see, it uses a number of whiles to loop through and update those changes, and then it saves it right back into the history field. So obviously there's too much to go through everything in there, but that is the history field for storing it. And we'll move on to the next section here. I've also, from that particular history, when it writes a history, this is what it's going to look like. So here's a full history of the particular record I'm on in this template here. As you can see, you have, here's when the record was originally created. So that's the first change. Here's what was originally put in. I put a 2 in the test field. Then the next change I did here comes through, and you see I changed test field to 5. So I just went into that field and changed the test field to a 5. And then I came back in here again at a later date. I changed test field to 6. So as you can see here, in this case here, I changed 2 fields. I changed test field 1 and test field 3 to 4 and 3. And so it creates a JSON record for every change that is made to let you know that who's making it. So you can see it creates kind of a long history here. I generally change the custom function not to make it pretty and format it like this, because that gives it takes some performance time out of it, but it's a whole lot more useful for looking at than just the string text of JSON, because it's easier to write here to see, what things were changed and what values they were changed to. But this can be a little bit voluminous to look through if there are a lot of changes over time. So I created a shortened version of it. So this is the history as a shortened version, and all it does is give who changed it, what the modifications were, and the timestamp. And it gets rid of all those other things about what the IP was, what script was running, or anything like that, and makes it a little shorter and easier to see what changes were made and when. And then I've got a brief and related one that actually just gives you the timestamp and who changed it and what their username was. And so those are just 3 different custom functions that you can see in the custom functions here. This is the short, and then the one line that was what I called the brief, and then the short one line when they basically read what's in this one, and then they strip out things to make it more simple. That way, if you the users may only want to see the brief one information instead of all the information, so it doesn't confuse them. But anyway, those are just some custom functions to help you make these happen. And see if we can get back to where we were at here. There's our history short and our history one-liners, custom functions. So one of the things was I did this all within the FileMaker field calculation called syshistory. You could also do a history with scripts. The problem is you have to count on a script always running, and you can't always count on a script running. People say I'm going to set script triggers or things like that on layout load or on record exit or any of those things. But the reality is, what if someone makes a new layout? Does it automatically happen? Well, then if you don't set the script triggers on that new layout, it doesn't automatically happen. So what I like about using a custom function that's stored in the same record is that I can be assured that if they make another layout, they're not going to end up bypassing some audit trail that is done by scripting. And that I found has been more reliable to me. But you do have to use a delete record script, and then I also use a replace script that loops through and replaces things instead of the FileMaker replace function, which overrides the get system modification trigger that we need to make our function work. So all of this stuff is available over on my webpage. So let me call that up real quick so you can see it. No. There's my webpage. It's just tms.us. And you come down here and click on templates. And this just takes you over into the FileMaker WebDirect of my server, which seems to be going slow right now, but here it is. And this just is a list of all the different templates that are out there. There's like the full calendar implementation. There's Zippopotamus. You'll see I've done a lot of different API things like the Zebra barcoding API. You got some two-factor authentication stuff. You got the admin console stuff. Anyway, there are a number of these currency conversion things, APIs, the 4over API, which is a graphics thing. So anyway, these are all things that I've developed primarily for different customers I've had. So thank you to different of my clients. They were paid for primarily by these clients. One of my agreements I have with my clients is that when I make scripts and functions for them, I retain the IP rights to them, and then I share that in the community or with other clients I use, and it helps make development faster. So, but these were all basically, in essence, paid for the development by some of my clients, and it is being shared here out here, and you can go and download any of these you want. Hopefully you might find one or two of them useful. This is the most recent one that I just updated, the one we were doing, just to show that it had I put our user group, the Kentuckiana, on the front label of this one to show I updated as a presentation here. So, but that's where you can get this, download it. There's no locks on it or anything. It'll open up under full admin account with no password and full access for you to play around with and do anything you want with it. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to questions and answers. So let's see what some of you guys have about questions and answers on this custom function for keeping tracks of audit trails.
So the first question I have is about the deleting. Does it capture any related records as well?
No. And that's why you need to have the script. What I do is I have the script delete that record, and then I also have it provide a script and a subscript to run if it needs to go delete related records, and you have to write that subscript. So when I have it run a delete on most of mine, I also have it be able to provide a subscript to go delete related records to it. So yes, That is a true, or you can always do cascading deletes in FileMaker, but then it doesn't record those cascaded deletes. And that is one of the most dangerous things I don't recommend anybody ever use. I've seen more things erroneously, accidentally erased that way.
Well, yeah, that was the question I had because, you know, I do use cascading deletes and as long as I know the structure well enough. And but yeah, I was wondering how you would capture any related records.
Yes, you certainly have to plan those out.
Yes.
Taylor, you mentioned that you don't like to use custom functions, or you hadn't used custom functions before because you could never guarantee they were in the solution. Did you ever think of using like scripts, function scripts?
Well, the problem with scripts is making sure that they always run. And so that was the whole problem I had, that, you know, if a script doesn't run, you know, usually you're setting them as a trigger, like on record save or something.
Right.
And, but the problem is, what if you have someone create a new layout? You know, do you make sure, you know, how do you make sure that they add those script triggers to other layouts? And so I just can't, I have a hard time trusting that, you know, often I'm co-developing on these things. And so I can't trust other people not to do things. But I can trust that if it's a custom function on that particular record, that every time it is changed, that it will update with the exceptions of the import and the replace functions.
So those are auto enter auto calcs.
Yep, it happens just by making a modification. And they're in essence, what happens is at the record level, they have a record trigger, and the trigger is the get modified, you know, field, get modified date trigger is what's triggering it. And every time, because FileMaker has this tool that every time a field is modified, any stored value is changed in any field, it hits that, get modified field calculation, and that I can use to trigger this history field. And the history then says, well, let's go out and find out all of the changes in that record, and let's record those changes, as well as additional information like who changed it, what their FileMaker version was, were they running a script, were they, things that we often want to, go back, if we're trying to follow the trail on someone of, who did what and when, we want to know a lot of those things so that we can go back. And of course, as I said, a lot of this is sold to decision makers is this prevents fraud and helps you to be able to go prosecute someone, if they, criminally stole from you or something. But the reality is 99% of the time, this is more of an educational thing. You're finding users that are not using the system properly, and you need to know which user was doing it improperly so you can retrain them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I sometimes have, so when weird things happen, I sometimes just have it email me something that says, hey, so-and-so did this, when it should have done this. And so then I know about it right away.
Mm-hmm. Some people have those fancy debug button that you can say, if it does something and they put it on each layout, you click that and you can do a screen capture and they can provide whatever information.
Yeah. Those
are kind of nice too, but I don't like to have to rely on people to give me feedback. I like to be able to just go look at it and know, I know you changed this on this date and time, or someone logged into your computer did it at that time. Sometimes you have that problem. Like the company I'm at right now, they have a shipping department and the shipping guys all use the same login. So it's like, well, how can you tell which guy did this? Well, you can't.
Yeah. I've got an audit logging system that I run in all my solutions. And I mean, it is funny that the number of times a user will deny, the log. It's like the log says that you changed this to this on such and such a date at such and such. I know I didn't change that. And it's like, it doesn't just generate this out of nowhere. Like but the other thing too, I definitely found that it's, its best use as a training tool. I originally had my client that wanted an audit logging system instituted, and it was kind of the whole attitude in the office was like, we want to punish the people that are doing it wrong. And I was like, this is not for punishing people. It's for educating people. It's for training. And it ended up working out really great. And it does work out really great. But the one I'm using, there's a couple of things. I'm really curious about get modified fields and how that works. The one that I'm using currently, I feed it a list of fields that I basically pick and choose. And so if I make any changes in the table, I have to remember to go to the log field and, add that new field into the log field or whatever. And you were saying get modified field just grabs stored fields. But
well, it just grabs the modified fields. Now
right,
I use the get FileMaker tables, base tables to get I use the field type, the SQL field type to know to only pull stored ones. So I make a SQL call to say, what are the stored fields for that particular table? And I only record the stored ones. You don't want to store the calculated ones.
Right. So does get modified fields return?
Nope.
It returns only the stored fields, correct?
Right. You have to here. I'll show you where it gets the let me screen share. Come on, screen share back on. Screen share coming up here.
Yeah, I've never used that function.
Yeah, I was just trying to play around with it in data viewer and I couldn't get any results with it. So
let's see. Get so this is where I find out what are the stored fields. I don't know, that's probably real slow there, but what I do is whatever the table name is, I say select field name from base table fields, where base table name equals, and then I give it whatever table I'm working on for that record. And then field class is normal. Normal means it's a stored field. It's not calculated. It's not a summary. It's not, any of these other funky things. It's basically text, number, or date. And that's how I know what all the fields are that I want to, store in.
So you are producing a list of stored fields and then get modified fields is picking from that list. I'm not sure where get modified fields comes into play.
Get modified fields, just here, let's go do an example here. Let's see. Okay, these are my test fields for making changes here. So I'm just going to unhide one of them. And then, so if we go to the data viewer here, let me come over here. I get our data viewer up here. So if we do fields, okay, so if I evaluate this now, I'm not going to get anything because nothing has been changed. Now, if I come over here and add a number over here and refresh this, maybe it doesn't show it here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it doesn't show in data viewer because I was trying to get results in data viewer and I wasn't able to do it.
Does it not work until after you commit?
Oh, you have to exit the field. That's right. So now that I've exited the field, it now has the modified fields. So this tells me test field was modified. So basically I typed a number, I hit tab. I didn't hit enter. I mean, I don't want to commit it. I just want to go to the next field. And if you go to the next field, then it tells you what was done. Now it just tells you the field that was modified. It doesn't tell you the value. So now's where you're going to have to do something like, whatever the field was, you need to evaluate that field to find out what that value is.
Well, that's pretty nice.
Does
And
that
so
make
just
sense?
by tabbing out, if that's the only field on the layout, this is a basic question. It's not committing the record if you tab out of it and it's the only field.
Right. Well, here, let
I
me
don't
hide
remember,
a couple
actually.
others here. Well,
No, you know what I'm saying. If it were the only one in there, you tab out.
because tabbing is just going to the next field.
That's correct.
It's not committing the record. And we're trying to get modified fields goes away when you commit the record. And so we're trying to make a change
Yeah, and see the
without
change. Yeah,
without committing it. And that's
or
why I was
acknowledge
using
the
tab.
change.
So if I, put some values in here.
I
And
see. So they just add up.
so it just lists the 3 different fields. And
Mhm.
then I have to do a while to go through and say, what are those values? So I do a while that loops through and evaluates each of those. And then it saves it in the JSON to say, what was changed.
Got it.
That's where we get the.
Taylor, have you
Yeah.
seen that audit log where they query the host? It only works on hosted files, but where they query the host for the current state. But before you commit the record, you query the host and it will have the previous data, and then you compare the data on the current record, and you pick and choose just the ones that have changed, and then you commit the record. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that one, but
It's a real cool way to get the previous data, because until you commit the record.
Jonathan, what's the command or the process to pull the server data?
Well, you just do a
you're calling the API.
well, you
Oh,
could
have to
call
use
the API,
data
or you
API.
could just
Oh, that's
you could
right.
just ask what's in the field, because it's not committed yet.
The
So like,
problem is if you're for example, if you do SQL, FileMaker tries to, even if you've made changes to only to show you the changes in that record. So you have to do either a perform script on server or somewhere else where the state is not the one that you're in. And you can do that with an API. Because otherwise, if I make a change here and I do a SQL on it, FileMaker tries to be smart and it includes your change. You're trying to find it without the change. So you have to, that's why you have to use the data API to find out what it is.
I think what they did was a perform script on server.
Yeah,
something like that, where went and grabbed the off the server, but it worked like almost like magic, because it knew what the previous one was and the current one. But until you committed the record, of course. So
I always worry about those things with performance issues, because also you run the on first window open and you have a new login and things like that. And I was trying to keep this as efficient as possible. And I know if you use this one and you keep all of the changes, you're always able to roll back. I think I have a rollback script even in here. That will, let's see, rollback. Maybe I didn't put it in here. Maybe I need to add that on it. I've got it. I just don't have it on the template here, but basically it would look at any history thing. And you say, if you're looking at the current history, if you're saying, I want to test field is a 2 here. If you want to know, if you're, right here, if this was the last record, you want to say it's now 5. What was it before? You have to loop back through looking for a test field until you find a value. And then that's how you know what the previous value was in this JSON. So wherever you're at, you have to loop back through the JSON until you find that field with a value. And then that will tell you what the previous value was.
The one that I'm using,
and
actually,
you could also test for the timestamp. And like say you want to go back to yesterday rather than this morning.
Nice.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
Right. You can set, yeah, exactly. That's, and obviously, this, I'm aiming this at developers. So those are the type of things as a developer, you would provide a user interface that would give them the opportunity to select the time or how to roll back or whatever. And this is just kind of an extension for you to make use of. But yes, you're right that, this is not something you'd want to present to a user.
Oh yeah.
I was just going to say that the one that I'm using and have been using for years was originally, I think I got it from Skeleton Key, and it basically just is storing in a log file, just like a text block that's, pipe separated and then return separated. So it's just, but the nice thing about it is, I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, they found a way to find the last entry for that field, basically by finding the position in that text block of that field's last entry and grabbing the last value. So when it logs the change, it actually does log it was changed from this value to this value.
Well, you could do that here too, that
Yeah.
it would slow up the function, but you in essence, but yes, you certainly can do that right here. Just add to the custom function where it, looks back for the previous value and includes it too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just modify the custom function. If it's that important that you want to see both together, then just modify the function to do that.
Yeah, I think it is very useful. I found that to be able to just simply see what it was changed from, so you can easily just change it back. The other thing,
right, and that would be what you would want to show in a report to someone. This is just what developers see. So you could write a report from this that would go back and show the current, the change value as well as the previous value in a report that would loop back through. But yeah, this certainly isn't end user friendly.
and I think getting a list of the data fields by querying the schema basically with SQL. I think I mentioned when we were talking about a pause on error. I used basically that technique to try and populate the field for this one and give me a list of fields, but it was just horribly slow and was just unusable with the way. And I think you mentioned before, it's like that there's, depending on how you query it, one is real slow and one isn't.
Okay, this is the big change that happened in 19.4. I don't know if you can see that.
Okay.
FileMaker _ base table fields. That does not query all the table occurrences. It only queries the one base table, and it goes massively faster than just FileMaker _ fields. So if you do FileMaker _ fields, that was the problem I had before it. And that's why I was using that global schema thing, because I was trying to do workarounds on it because it was painfully slow going through all the table occurrences. And this makes a big difference. So
yeah, that's exactly what I ran into, that it was painfully slow and made the solution unusable. So
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad
it was
to know
painful.
about that. Yeah.
So anyway, but FileMaker keeps having these little improvements come along that make a big difference.
Yeah.
So, we hoping they've got more and more of these things happening. So
going back to
talking with my clients about going with WebDirect more, because it's so much faster. In some situations, it's massively faster than accessing remotely with the FileMaker app.
Well, it's massively faster at low latency. If you're on the same local area network, it's not. But that's the big advantage of people that have low latency, which bad connections are they're far away. You get anything latencies over about 20, and FileMaker really sucks. So WebDirect really makes a big difference, because what you're doing is, you have no latency because it's all being done on the server, and it's just the server is in essence, shooting back a screen capture of what's there. But all the thinking's done on the web server. The disadvantage is if you have a large user base, if you got 60 or 100 people using WebDirect at the same time, you better have a honking server, because that means everything's being done on the server. The one reason why FileMaker servers often work well that aren't very beefy is because the clients do an awful lot of the work in the FileMaker Pro client server relationship. But as soon as you go to WebDirect, it's not client server. You're just server.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you have latency, like it's hosted somewhere else in the country, some online host somewhere, it really makes a difference.
Definitely.
One thing, let's see if I can show this.
But you're right, I wouldn't do that for an on-prem.
Okay, let me share my screen again real quick. I'll do this. One thing conveniently in most of my solutions, including this one, I keep a script up here called Who Am I? And I think a lot of people have various versions of it, but it's a JSON thing of who am I? And one of the neat things about it is it shows the latency. Now I've opened it locally, so latency 0. There's no network. It's on my hard drive. So, but on a network, it'll return the latency. And so a lot of times people are having a hard time connection. I'll tell them, go run the who am I, go down to latency and tell me what they are. And if they tell me their latency is 100, I tell them you're screwed, So, and they will tell me, oh, but I have this super fast internet. I said, well, I don't care how fast, your bandwidth is, that's the width. This is the response time, and FileMaker's server and client is very chatty, and latency, the chat, basically the ping speed is all important on a chatty thing. It's not like something where you're doing a movie where the bandwidth is everything. This latency is and this is what's important also to like gamers, low latency. So most of my in-house solutions I will see on local area networks are below 5, almost always below 10, but in a local area network. But as soon as you get outside of the local area network, it's not unusual to see 20 to 50. Yeah, you can get by with that, but as soon as you get above 50, things really get painful in the FileMaker world.
How are
That
you
is
getting
certainly
the
when you want to go to
speed?
WebDirect.
What kind of mechanism are you using to get the speed, the latency?
Oh, that's a good question. Have to get a little tricky on it. Let's see. Let me show you the script. And I'm also going to tell you, before you think I'm a genius on the one, I did not come up with this. So this came out of the FileMaker forums in the community. Let's see, where is the thing?
Oh, they get UTC seconds minus start. Okay.
And I actually do it, I think, I forget how many times. I do it 10 times to, get an average.
Oh,
because always your first one is really way out there.
Right.
But
I see. That's good.
Okay. There's one really important thing you got to see here. There's the UTC milliseconds, and of course we can now get down to microseconds or whatever, but this is what triggers that. It's someone figured out a long time ago that the reason why this works is it is the one call that goes to the server that forces a response every time, because that response cannot be stored in a cache. Most everything we do in FileMaker gets cached, and the second time you call it is much faster because it's in the cache. This function is uncacheable, and that's why this works, because you're calling an uncacheable function. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you say you do it 10 times?
Yep.
Just so you can have a number that is in the multiple digits?
No, I have it average them. Here, I'll do it on one I have over here.
Oh, I see. You average them. Okay, that makes sense.
Developer, let's see, who am I? Here's one I just did on a server on the other thing here. This is on a local area network. I got 0.5. That's how we should all have our networks.
Yeah.
But you won't get that over a wide area network ever. But your local area network, anything below 5 is generally pretty good on the local area network. But I like getting things 1 and below.
I've got AT&T fiber to my house, and it's a gigabit symmetrical.
Yep.
And I have seen WAN latency at 10 milliseconds with that sucker. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the nice thing about it is it's because it's light, fiber is light, and they're bringing the fiber all the way into your modem. That
Yeah.
really makes a whole lot better performance than any of these coax cable things. Other thing too is coax cable requires power, and your light does not. And so if you lose power, if you got an on-site generator, you don't lose your internet like you lose with coax either.
Well, the interface box that converts the light to Ethernet requires power. So I
Yes.
got that on the.
So,
You
but
put
if
that
you
on
have a
UPS.
generator like I do at home, I can retain internet when everything's gone down on the grid near where I'm at, because it's going by light. It makes it over.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, Texas had its big freeze. Everybody was freezing their butts off here, and all the power, they were doing the rolling blackouts. Well, I had my generator going, and I never lost any internet.
Nice.
But all the coax people lost it. Just even if you have power, the coax, because they've got to push the power across the coax, it doesn't make it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, the poor clients that have these asymmetrical, DSL lines or stuff like that. It's just, I feel so bad for them.
Yeah, the AT&T fiber is great. The symmetrical gig up and down, and gets great low latency. I hear you can also get up to. They're offering 2 and 5 options too that I'm looking to add to mine. I'm using it,
Really?
their business line on it with 32 IPs, and it works great.
That must be expensive.
Not really. It's a whole lot cheaper than it used to be. I'm under $200 a month.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
totally
I only pay
doable.
80 for mine, but I only have the one IP, of course.
Are you residential or a commercial account?
Residential.
Yeah, that's why I'm paying 200, you're paying 80, but anyway.
I with the cable company, they had the 2 tiers, and I said, so what's the difference? And they said, well, with the professional one, we respond to you within 8 hours. With the home one, the residential one, we respond within 24 hours. That's the only difference.
Right, exactly. And that's what you're paying for. Down here, ours is 4 hours, but anyway, but yeah, that's what you're paying for on the business side of things. There's nothing physically different about it.
Yeah.
And of course, at those rates, those are shared connections. Those are not dedicated. So if you want a dedicated gig up and down, you're looking at 2,000 to 2,400 a month. So, but the times that I ever get down to even 950, megabits per second is pretty rare. So, it's not been, even though I'm on shared connection, it's not been worth going to, dedicated. They're always trying to sell me the dedicated. I'm like, well, you got to make it worth it. I'm not going to just, 2,400 a month. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So,
No, I
but
keep looking for alternatives here, but they don't offer them in my area.
Well, fiber sure is useful if you can get it in your area. It sure helps a lot. So I don't know. What does Kentucky have up there? They've got AT&T fiber, and what else do they have up there?
Well, cable is Comcast, or
Okay.
who is it now?
Spectrum.
Spectrum. They all own each other, so you have no telling who they really are.
Okay, well, that's all I have for my presentation. Good to meet you guys and hang out and see some old friends here and all.
Yeah.
It was great.
I noticed Charles has joined us.
Yeah. Hey, Charles.
Hey guys, how's everybody today?
Good. Hey,
I figured I'd pop in. I keep seeing the emails and it's like, and then it's like Tuesday. Tuesday's like a swamp day. We do all internal work. So,
yeah.
But then I figured, okay, I'm going to pop in today. I'm going to do it.
So what's the Charles Delph? Forgive me for asking. What's the Charles Delph's take on audit logging?
Audit logging?
is this something that
Sure.
that you resonate with, or do you have a totally different way you approach it?
You know what? I don't have a fixed way of approaching it because I think there's all different types of logging that
Mhm.
people need. Something as simple as something dumping a last value into a preferences field, to something where you're just simply concatenating onto a list of just a regular text list, to right up to something that's full record by record. Each edit becomes a new record, that kind of a thing. One of the nice things about dumping the data into JSON type format is now you can do something with it afterwards. You can either reconstruct data, you can use that to build a sync engine out of. That's actually what we're working on today. So you can do a lot of different things. So I think it really comes down to what you want to do, and if you already have some kind of module as was demonstrated there, and you can pop it in. We have a very simple logger that we pop into lots of different apps too. So, but
Cool.
yeah, I don't think there's a one size fits all in that sense.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was just curious what you thought. I mean, your presence is kind of intimidating, Mr.
Oh, geez, I
such
don't
a
know about
genius.
that. I don't know. Not today.
I really liked Taylor's approach, and so I was curious what you thought.
No, I agree with dumping data into a JSON type format. I think, Taylor, you mentioned that it wasn't developer friendly. To me, it's more developer friendly. I think that's the way you should go. You're separating your interface from your data, and that's what you really should be doing, because that gives you so much more flexibility going forward. You're not tied in. It makes it more transportable into other apps, because you're not worrying about what the UX is, copying layouts and fields and all kinds of garbage that goes with it. Right. So, and the nice thing is there too, is you can have a third-party system can be making some changes, and it can push that data into the same format. In fact, we're building something almost the same right now. It's a synchronization engine, and it's designed to allow various types of devices, including FileMaker Go, to all work offline, and they all sync up. They all sync up to the cloud. And in that case, we're doing something very similar, just that we're taking the diffs, the data that got changed. So if I change my middle name field, I have send the primary key of an ID and a middle name field, and I send that off to everybody else. Keep the package very small. Then you're not affected by things like latency or bandwidth or anything like that by minimizing that. And everybody receives that, and you effectively get field by field matching. So it's
Yeah,
using
one of the
same
challenges in trying to get efficient on that is how FileMaker thinks about things, at least as of now. One of the problems that are with the Draco engine is that FileMaker thinks a whole record at a time, which is kind of why sometimes you get these better performances out of some of these SQL engines, because they can look at just a field at a time through the whole database and not be having to look at the whole record every time it goes through every.
One nice thing though to keep in mind is you have to look at, like, that's good for IO type bandwidth, but something like a log, as long as the log is eventually consistent, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, even a day, right? However long it takes, then it's not really such a bad thing for something like that. Same as syncing. Most server to server syncing things like mirror sync or something, you're running it every periodic time, every 2 minutes or whatever, 10 minutes or something like that. So the bandwidth of the IO of the engine, of the database itself, doesn't matter too much, because the data is not really fluctuating.
Yeah, but that's part of what I'm saying. When we're trying to optimize things, we're just trying to have it send small bits of changes instead of whole records at a time. And that's what you're in essence saying here is, but the on the IO side of things, as you're saying, FileMaker does think a whole record at a time. And that when you start, I used to be with the government, and I would be dealing with, tables that had, 20 million records in it. Well, you don't ever do calculation fields, and you don't do, everything. When you try to read it, you got to keep your tables very skinny. You got to keep things get ridiculous, so there are some challenges even at the IO level when they have, reading the whole record at the time. But, likewise, Claris is already looking, when they're looking at, other databases now, and they're, and these new things, they're looking at how there are different ways of treating data to maybe optimize things and also look at things that can be done more parallel. And that's why FileMaker is getting better and better. And that's why we, in our latest version, are dealing more at the transaction level in a way we were never able to before.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Back
that may
to-
change on history end of things too. Keep in mind, if we're having more control over transactions and whether they go through or not. And anyway, just there's a lot that can be coming down the road on it.
The use of MongoDB, even for the extra outside FileMaker stuff, but I mean, the whatever Claris Pro, that's a huge departure for FileMaker. That's their first big step away from Draco.
Well, and the thing is, there are some certain things that a database like Mongo really does well, and large simultaneous transactions, even across, multiple servers, there's some amazing things it can do. But there are also some things that Draco does that are a real challenge to make things like it work well with. It does, Mongo is not it has some issues with things, particularly like, container fields. It is not near as flexible on that. So there's some things that we bring to the table that we expect from our Draco experience that when we see these faster databases, we don't realize that they don't easily do everything we expect. And so I know that's the dance Claris has to do. We want to bring the new performance in, but they also know we're bringing our expectations, historic expectations of FileMaker too.
Yeah. Well, and there's certainly some relationships you can do that would require a massive SQL query that just absolutely would bring most SQL developers to their knees, and we can do it without any effort with relationships. So anyway.
Okay, Ron.
I was going to say, just going back to the presentation, you made a comment about it one time. You had like an aversion to using custom functions. I think for me, it goes back to when you had to have FileMaker Advanced in order to do custom functions, and you could never be sure if somebody had advanced or not. And so it seemed like everybody was always asking for, when you come up with some kind of solution to something that used a custom function, they're like, can you do it without a custom function? So yeah, I had that.
I know this is a trivial historical question, but that being what it was, could the solution utilize the custom function and not be advanced?
Yes, you just couldn't
trying to do that from memory. Okay, you just couldn't edit it.
You couldn't create or install
or create or edit. Okay.
Yeah. So you would have to install it with advanced, but a regular pro user could then use it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because normally only the developer would have the advanced copy and all the users
That's
would have
right.
just pro.
Yeah.
Well, that was a duh question on my part then.
Yeah.
In the trivial scheme of things. Trivia.
So how you been, Rosemary? You've been quiet.
Oh, I'm listening and trying to do 6 other things as I try to get ready to go on vacation. So
Nice.
no, we've been busy. I hope you all have seen and are planning to attend our webinar tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Raise your hand if I should drop the registration links into the chat because you didn't hear about it. All right.
Please, because it might be in mine, but I didn't see it.
Yes,
I'm
let's see, we've got 2 sessions tomorrow, one at, I think, noon Eastern and one at 7 p.m. Eastern to cover our APAC audience. So that's coming up. So we've been very
happy
busy
if they would announce and engage then too.
ready for that.
I know Rosemary can't say anything, but I'm sure I'm getting frustrated missing out on my Engages or developer conference.
Yeah.
We hear you, Taylor. We miss it too. And I know Brad said, oh, I just realized, of course, I'm talking to you on my iPad and the links are on my computer. So I'm just going to have to quick re-log into Zoom before I can give you those links.
Well, Ron and I can look in our email, see if we got it.
I do have it.
Okay, hang on. I might have it too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got it. Don't worry about it. I've got it.
All right, good.
Thank
yeah,
you.
hope to see you. And of course, if you can't make it, we'll record it and it will be on our YouTube channel probably first thing Thursday.
Well, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Taylor for doing the presentation today. I know he had basically said he could commit to 45 minutes and some questions and maybe going long for you. So if you need to duck out, I wanted to make sure I thanked you beforehand. So it was good seeing you,
Taylor.
Good seeing all of you.
Good to see you, Taylor.
Yeah, good job,
care.
Taylor. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was nice.
I know last month I had mentioned I was hoping to find somebody that could speak on the transaction script step. And unfortunately, I'm still working on the networking aspect of being able to find people. So I wasn't able to find anybody yet, but
There's a number of dev houses that have blogs. Maybe somebody from one of those.
yeah.
Yeah, Vince Manano has did a presentation, I think, for the Bay Area group in December and FM Disc a couple weeks ago. So you may just want to watch that one and
Yeah, I need to
get in
stay
touch
on
with
top
him.
of all the other groups and see who's presenting what too. It's like I'm still pretty new to this facilitating the group and trying to find presenters and stuff. So still pretty new to networking and FileMaker and making connections. So I will see what I can do for next month.
Okay, good. Good job, Ron.
Yeah, good job.
Got me to turn out.
I'm glad y'all were here.
Yes, and we as Claris are trying to be generally more present. So
Yeah,
as long as people are meeting virtually, you will probably see me or a colleague at more frequently than you have been.
That's great.
You know, we met for a long time, and we would have people occasionally remote in from Claris or from FileMaker. But when we went totally virtual, I mean our viewership, our participation went global. It was really amazing that we could get people from anywhere. And so we've had people from all over the world in the meetings.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So it's definitely a plus there. I mean, our local Toronto-based meetup group, we have maybe another 20%, 30, 40%, somewhere in that range, more people who show up to our occasional virtual ones. But I wonder if there's any disadvantages, because I know the in-person aspect from the networking and things, somebody had mentioned about Engage and such. So there must be some disadvantages as well by not having maybe there's an apogee with a blend, certain number of real world events, or maybe it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know the world has really changed. And I just got rejected from a group, from the Miami group, because they have gone back to fully and only in person.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny that you'd limit somebody. I understand that you basically want to say you have to be in person because people will just stay at home. And then, you'll hear the dog barking in the background and they're not really paying attention, which is kind of disheartening for the presenter. But it's almost like a hockey game or something. You want to let everybody who's local, they have to come, and everybody else, they can come virtual or something like that. Maybe we need a new type of Zoom.
Yeah,
feature.
block out the local.
Blackout. Yeah, that's exactly.
Oh, you're right, because I met Ron because of our in person. I mean, I knew I met Alan because of our in person, which
I
led to
didn't,
this,
Mhm.
which
I didn't
led
even,
to you.
I used to
even
use it as a
start
good
attending
excuse
the
to
group
travel.
until after it went Zoom. Like,
Really? So
Yeah.
I just remembered wrong.
yeah.
I thought I'd known you before then.
No, I'm absolutely grateful for the Zoom because that was what allowed me to participate in the first place. I don't know when I'd ever would have been able to get up to Louisville in person at that
Mhm,
time. I mean,
mhm.
it just wasn't as doable. Now I would be able to go, to an in person because my situation has kind of changed and I have the leeway to do that, but I wouldn't have been able to before. So I wouldn't have been able to be involved a few years ago. So
Yeah, Beverly lives in Eastern Kentucky, and it's like a 4.5 hour drive for her. So she only made it on rare occasions.
Mhm.
well, I think Alan's working on a facility to be able to start doing a hybrid of in person and Zoom. So
Yep, we broke ground on it, so we're hoping to have by summer a facility that can do both in person and online at the same time.
Yeah, I suggest both Pittsburgh and Minnesota groups are having good success with the hybrid, with
Okay.
some in person and some online.
yeah,
I think
That's good to
didn't
know.
the Minnesota group publish how they did it, how what tools they used and stuff?
Mhm.
They published
Did they?
something.
Oh,
I thought because it's kind of a technical challenge
Mhm.
for all the audio and for people to see each other when you point a camera and it's this room where everybody's spread out and you can't really see anybody to and then all these other faces. So it's and then the audio problems are
Mhm.
myriad. So
We're working with the local college to help build our system out, and
nice.
and hopefully it'll work. I mean, because they had to do a lot of experimenting, so we'll see how that worked out. But we're literally having to build a facility to do it right, so it's taking some time.
yeah, I
Cool.
would think it's either one camera and one microphone, or if you have everybody individually, then you have to I would think you'd still have to just have one audio source because the feedback when two people have their microphones open, or that's when the problems come in. So
Well, you sort of have a
yeah.
combination. You've got a speaker, which will have like a lavalier, but then you also have a group microphone, which is sort of like for the whole group. And then they like to have at least 3 cameras. So that means also then you have to have someone in behind the scenes mixing all this. So
yeah,
Mhm.
kind
And
of
we've been
running
really
it.
lucky in Toronto. We have a amazing facility that's organized by Beatrice Babineau, and it's at the hospital for sick children, and it's a special building just for training doctors and medical workers. So it's an actual amphitheater type shape with multiple screens, and then there's a couple cameras that are on pivots. So you push the microphone button in front of where you're sitting, and the camera zooms in and it points at you, and then you're part of the PA. So it's very interactive. And then whoever's speaking on Zoom, of course, goes up on one of the panels as well. So they jump on the screen as well. But we don't use it very often. We only use it maybe a handful of times. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest, most important things for me is to hopefully everybody realizes that Zoom cannot completely replace in person. Like, I miss the in-person stuff, and I've only been to one DevCon, and I'm just, I was scheduled to go to the first one in Nashville in 2020, and so every year since I've been like, are we gonna have it? Are we gonna have it? Because it's right down the road in Nashville. So, yeah, definitely hoping that that comes.
Rosemary, we really are all hoping there's a death clock. You don't need
So
to
are
reply.
we.
You don't need to reply. Just hear us.
I will just say, so are we.
Okay. When you get off the phone, you can say that user group really wants to go. All
I
the
think
people.
I've been saying that after every group that I've
Oh,
been
okay,
in.
okay, good, good.
Well, and we especially wanted in Nashville because it like Ron says, it is just down the road. I mean, we could almost commute to it
Mhm.
from Louisville.
Oh, it's true.
Almost.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
It's only
Especially
a
from
3-hour
Bowling Green.
drive.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's-
you're right next door.
yeah, like 45 minutes away. So
Yeah.
I could literally get up and go in the morning and come home at night.
Yep. So we're all staying at Ron's house.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, that's a good plan.
Yeah.
I will pass that on.
Several of them have gone to the pause that was in Georgia. It was relatively close too.
I've been
That worked out really
twice,
well
yeah.
for you. and
Ron's been
Ron.
twice.
Yep.
Dean went once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was there. Rosemary, I didn't see you there last year, did I? No.
No, I didn't make it either year. I think you said Janine was there last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
no,
Yeah,
Janine
the
was
one
there
before,
2
I
years ago.
think.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
That's
mean, we
right.
try to keep the Claris footprint at pause pretty lightweight and like rotated through people just because it's such a small event that if we send 10 or 15 people, we're
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
we're taking over and we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I've never asked this question. How big is Claris? How many employees are there? I have no idea. Might be 20, might be 200. I have no idea.
No, it's in I can't remember either because, we've got employees all over the world.
Mhm.
So I think it's in the 300
Okay.
range.
That sounds.
We're kind of a middle-sized,
That
small to
sounds
middle-sized software company.
That's kind of in the range I thought it would be. I don't know why I thought 200, but yeah, 300
It's
plus.
probably about 200 in the US. And then,
Mm-hmm.
we got people in Europe, in London, in Sydney, in
Mhm.
Japan, and in China.
And I've always heard rumors that FileMaker is huge in Japan. Is that true? You can tell us.
Yes, they are
Thought it
our second
was.
biggest market after the US or after North
I
America.
thought that was true. Yeah.
Yeah, they're bigger than Europe. So,
Oh, that's a big fact.
yeah.
Yeah, because Europe's 400 million and Japan's 125 million. Oh, yeah, that's a big stat. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
think
learn
we've shown that
Japanese.
at DevCon in the past, but
Mhm.
yeah, Americas is our biggest market, and then Japan, and then Europe,
Mhm.
and then the rest of APAC.
Mhm.
So you don't count all of Asia in the Japan stats? Japan's
Mhm.
their own?
Japan is their own, and then it's like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, China are all, I think, what we consider the APAC region.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Well, I'm going to go to work.
I think we could probably go ahead
Get
and
to
wrap
work.
it up at this point.
All right.
Yeah, Ellen. All right. Good to see everyone.
All
Good
right,
to see you
Brian.
all.
Awesome.
Have a
Thanks,
great
guys.
day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Shall we go ahead and
Ron,
wrap it up?
Ron, you want to hang around?
Sure.
Do you wanted to?
Yeah, we can go over that now if you want.
Nice to see you, Charles.